Hey everyone, welcome back to Bear It in Mind. This video is an exam paper walkthrough of the 2022 Paper 1 exam paper, specifically section C, the attachment topic. In a previous video I gave an overview of the whole paper with some general tips and advice, so do check that out if you haven't already done so, and you'll find links to the exam paper and mark scheme in the description below, as well as links to videos on the parts of attachment that we cover in these questions. Remember to pause the video and have a go at the questions yourself first, looking for the command words, the topic and the marks available before I walk you through it. In the attachment section for this paper there are 3 short questions and a 16-mark essay. Question 9 is a multiple choice question which says which 2 of the following attachment concepts were not introduced by Bowlby? 2 marks. First of all, make sure to complete multiple choice questions correctly as per the guidelines above. It will be a shame not to get the mark because you didn't fill it in correctly when you knew the answer. Secondly, a tip with answering multiple choice questions is to rule out the ones you are sure are incorrect first to help narrow it down. And thirdly, it sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed how many students don't read the question carefully. You must identify the ones that were not introduced by Bowlby. It's easy to read it in the positive and to look for the ones that match with Bowlby. Hopefully you remember from your studies of attachment that Bowlby proposed 2 theories, one called the monotropic theory and the other the maternal deprivation theory. The monotropic theory has numerous parts to it which can be remembered with the acronym Ask Me. Can you name all of them right now? Pause the video and have a go. For the purposes of this question, C refers to the critical period. In Bowlby's theories, this was where he outlined what could go wrong if a child was separated from their mother during the critical period, with one of the consequences being a lack of empathy for others, otherwise known as affectionless psychopathy. And in his monotropic theory, the I refers to the internal working model, so we can cross out all of those 3 from the list. This leaves us with C and E. So just to check, E, multiple attachments, refers to the stages of attachment as proposed by Schaefer and Emerson, so not Bowlby, and E, interactional synchrony, refers to the first section of attachment called caregiver-infant interaction, where Bowlby isn't covered. For more on Bowlby's monotropic theory and his maternal deprivation theory, you'll find links to the videos below. Question 10 says, outline one example of cultural variation in attachment, 2 marks. Cultural variation is referring to the work of Van Eysendorn and Cronenberg's meta-analysis that compared attachment types across cultures by analysing studies that had used the strange situation. The mark scheme would allow you to refer to other studies or examples, but this is the most likely study that students would refer to, particularly because it's named on the specification. Here you could choose some of the countries to show how attachment varied across culture. So you could write about how Germany were the highest for insecure avoidant, whereas in comparison, Japan were very high for insecure resistant. Note on the mark scheme that a statement that secure attachment is most common in most countries is not creditworthy, because this is not focused on what the question asked, which is about cultural variation. Question 11 says, Lenny is being interviewed for a TV dating show. He describes his approach to relationship. My friends would say I'm scared of commitment and need to settle down. I suppose they're right. I'm in my late 30s now. I fall in love constantly, but my relationships never last more than a few weeks. My mum left when I was very young. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Explain how, according to attachment research, Lenny's early experience might have influenced his later relationships, 4 marks. Whilst early experiences that can affect later relationships refers to the last part of the attachment topic, it also includes reference to other parts of the course, notably Bowlby's monotropic theory and Bowlby's maternal deprivation theory. The key part of Bowlby's theory it relates to is the internal working model. This is the idea that your primary attachment relationship acts as a model or template for later relationships. It provides the blueprint, a mental representation or schema of how to relate to other people. In this situation, you could write that Lenny's lack of early attachment has not provided an adequate template or blueprint for later relationships. The examiner's report at this point noted a few students implied that Lenny would not develop an internal working model at all, rather than his having acquired one based on his early experience. In other words, we all form an internal working model for good or for bad. You can't not form one, according to Bowlby's theory. You could further develop your answer by writing about attachment types. Insecure attachments are associated with fear of intimacy and lack of commitment in adult romantic relationships, which may explain Lenny's inability to settle down and form a long-term relationship. Or you could write about maternal deprivation theory, which states that any disruption to the attachment formed with the mother in early life, the critical period, leads to later emotional problems. In Lenny's case, this could explain his fear of commitment and intimacy. Or you could write about a piece of research, such as Hazen and Shaver's love quiz, where they found from their research into participants' attachment type and later love experiences that insecure avoidant attached adults were most likely to fear closeness in relationships and believe that love doesn't last. In Lenny's case, he might have an insecure avoidant attachment from childhood, which has gone on to shape his fear of commitment and intimacy. And finally, question 12 says, outline Lorenz's and Harlow's animal studies of attachment. Discuss what these studies might tell us about human attachment. 16 marks. This is a 16-mark essay, so the marks are divided up into 6 marks for AO1 and 10 marks for AO3 evaluation. You have around 20 minutes to write this, so you're looking for 2 to 3 paragraphs of AO1 and 3, possibly 4 paragraphs of AO3 if you have the time. Because this question requires you to outline Lorenz and Harlow, you could think about breaking down the 6 AO1 marks into 3 marks for each. So for Lorenz's research, you want to talk about his procedure and findings. So you could write about how grey lag goose eggs were randomly divided, half hatched with the mother present in a natural environment and half in an incubator with Lorenz present. And then they recorded the behaviour of the geese. And he found that the incubator group followed Lorenz, whilst the control group followed the mother. And his findings pointed to the ideas of imprinting and the critical period. For Harlow's research, you also want to write about his procedures and findings. So you could write about how infant rhesus monkeys were reared with 2 mother surrogates, a plain wire mother dispensing food, and a cloth-covered mother with no food. They measured the amount of time the monkeys spent with each mother. And in terms of the findings, you could write about the preference for contact comfort over food, and the long-term effects on child rearing style, particularly in terms of how the motherless monkeys became inadequate mothers themselves. Now for the second part of the question, the AO3. The key part in the wording of the question was what these studies tell us about human attachment. This means you won't gain credit for discussing animal studies in and of themselves. You've got to relate it to our understanding of human attachment. Listen to the examiner's report. The question asked for discussion of what these studies tell us about human attachment, and this was a great discriminator. Many students focused on evaluation of the original studies without linking that to the question. Overall, there was a common failure to link the findings of Lorenz and Harlow to theories of human attachment. So there are many things we could write for our AO3, but here's 4. Firstly, problems of generalizing findings from animal studies to humans. The behavior of geese is remarkably different from human behavior in many ways, and so limits the extent to which it can be applied. It could be argued that perhaps Harlow's studies with rhesus monkeys are more relevant, but still have limitations in what they can tell us about human attachment. Secondly, we could talk about the practical application of the findings. Having a poor attachment in childhood can have long-term consequences for future relationships and has drawn attention to the importance of these early years of life. This is vitally important for social workers who can use these insights to identify potential risk factors in vulnerable children so that support and intervention can be put in place. Thirdly, Harlow's research shows the importance of an internal working model, supporting Bowlby's monotropic theory, particularly in terms of the motherless monkeys who became inadequate mothers themselves. Their early attachment relationship form the template for their future relationships and shows how important this is for human attachments. Fourthly, Harlow's research challenges the learning theory explanation of attachment. This proposed that what was key for the formation of the attachment between the mother and their child was cupboard love, in other words, food. However, Harlow's research demonstrated that contact comfort was more important and as such has informed the importance of such contact in human attachments. This question is another good example of taking care to answer the question set rather than the question you want to write. You might know all about animal studies and how to evaluate them, but you've got to use that knowledge and relate it to the question you've been asked. So that completes section C. As a reminder, links to videos on any of the parts of attachment covered in this video can be found below, and in the next video we'll go through section D on psychopathology. I hope you found this video helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.